You are a miracle.
Cameron Beale writes and directs the 2023 sci-fi, horror, thriller, drama, The Veil. And this one stars Sean O'Brien and Rebekah Kennedy. Rebekah Kennedy you may know from the movie Two Witches. And I'm going to say right out the front that this review is going to have some mild spoilers, because I can't really talk about the film without really addressing some of what the actual plot is here. I'm not going to tell you what happened in the end, and I'll try and be as vague as I can, but there will be some kind of discussion about what's actually kind of happening in the plot. So you've been warned. It's a relatively short film. It's actually only about 70 odd minutes long, and it really only has two characters for the most part. So it primarily focuses on this priest who's retired. And the beginning of the movie, we see a flashback 40 years ago, and we see him as a younger man driving through this tunnel, and he's suddenly stopped by this Amish woman who kind of runs out in the road, played by Rebekah Kennedy. Now, at the same time this happens, there's like the aurora borealis, where it's called, you know, the kind of the magnetic lights above, and this Rebekah Kennedy's character Hannah basically seems to be running away from someone, and she's asking for help, and we see like a shadowy figure that's kind of following her. But this priest, as a younger man, gets spooked when she sort of suddenly kind of changes. There's something happens to her sort of face, and he kind of drives off, and she's like begging not to be kind of left behind. And then for the rest of his life, cut to now 40 years later, he's always regretted that decision and kind of wonders what happened to this woman, and, you know, thinks what terrible fate did he leave her to. And this now 40 years later, there seems to be the same type of magnetic light in the sky, kind of like an iridescent sort of effect that's caused by magnetic field, the aurora borealis. I can't pronounce that damn thing, but you know what I'm talking about. Anyway, and there's a knock on the door, and this same Amish woman appears to be needing help, but she hasn't aged. And he initially doesn't recognise her because it's been such a long time and all the power's out, so it's kind of like dim light and all that. And, you know, we learn that she needs help and she's kind of running away from someone. And it's kind of, she just disappears. And then there's another knock on the door, and it's her again, but seemingly starting from that sort of same point. So it's kind of like, and this is with a spoilery bit, it's kind of like a time loop effect. We presume that's caused by these kind of atmospheric effects, this iridescent light that's kind of like causing weird things to happen. Similar, I guess, to the movie Frequency, which actually played with that sort of same concept. And, you know, at this time, you know, he's kind of started to think, okay, well, this just happened, this has just happened, so why is she not remembering me now, and things like that, and things play out a little differently. What will happen, you'll have to watch the movie and find out. So that's the kind of the plot there. So it's, I mean, it's kind of a supernatural movie. Maybe it would fall under the horror umbrella, but it's on the very light side of horror. I mean, there's not really any jump scares or gore or violence even, but yeah, you could argue that it's sort of dark and eerie looking supernatural stuff. Maybe cosmic horror might be a better kind of umbrella term to put this under. So what do we think about it? Okay, so let's talk about the look of the film, the way this film is put together, because it certainly has a a very stylistic choice. So practically the whole film, both in the flashback and in the kind of the present time, we have this these magnetic fields that are causing these kind of atmospheric lights to kind of like give it this kind of strange green sort of glow, and at the same time it appears to affect like the power and stuff. So everything is either by this kind of light that's coming down from these atmospheric effects or by sort of candlelight for the most part. So it's pretty much a movie completely in low light. But I think the cinematography is done very well, because even though it is low light, it's not as if you can't see anything or you can't see things that you're meant to see. I think the great care has been taken here to use this kind of lighting and the cinematography to be part of the story and actually kind of inform it and kind of give it this this strange, almost tertiary character, you know, that kind of informs the narrative as well. And I think it, you know, it works really well to give you this sort of otherworldly feeling, and clearly demonstrate that there's something kind of like greater sort of going on. And obviously our characters are both people of faith, so you know you can draw kind of parallels to maybe what they're actually kind of experiencing and things like that. And just the way the movie is put together on a technical level, I think is just very well, because yes, it's a low light movie, but it's not one of these Aliens versus Predator Requiem movies where you just can't see, you know, what's going on and you're missing out. You can see what you are meant to be seeing, and when it is dark, it's kind of meant to be dark as part of the story. So it works really well. The actual narrative itself is somewhat kind of like, again, I don't want to kind of spell things out for you, but it's an interesting sort of there are supernatural phenomena going on here, and I think it does an okay job in kind of like what's actually happening here, but without kind of getting you like lost necessarily. I think the performances from our two main characters are very strong. There is a little caveat with this, I will say, which I'll come back onto, but I think the actual performances are acting in a very good way as they've been directed. Let me put it like that. I think the performances are strong. I believe both the characters, and I thought you could tell the kind of the chemistry and the kind of the relationship between these sort of two characters and how it kind of changes as the sort of the movie kind of goes on. You do feel there's like an ominous threat within the movie, and you know, obviously it gets revealed as we kind of go on and stuff like that. And in the end, I think this movie actually is one of these films which is kind of hopeful, and it's a movie somewhat about redemption, ultimately. So, you know, that I think, when you watch this film as a whole, you can think, generally speaking, even though it has ups and downs, generally speaking, I think the movie, yeah, it's a somewhat of a positive outlook, this film. So some of the, you know, some films we talk about, oh, it's, you know, it's mean-spirited, or it's kind of one of these films that is kind of depressing. And although there's definitely distressing scenes in the movie to a degree, not gory or anything like that, but sort of distressing, I think the way it plays out, I think, do you know what? I can kind of feel good about that film. I can kind of feel good about that experience. Okay, so let's talk about what doesn't work, and this is why I kind of give the spoiler warning here, because I'm going to have to sort of say, and again, I'm going to be as vague as I can without really spelling things out. But now the movie kind of involves this repeating of time, at least for some characters, or repeating events. And our central character is this retired priest, and you know, he had this experience with this Amish girl Hannah 40 years ago. Then he has that 40 years later with the now present time, and it's him we follow. She turns up at the door and then she kind of disappears, and then she turns up for a second time with kind of like no memory of the things that happened on both occasions previously. And I have some issues with the script about how that section plays out. Because the character of the priest, I feel, acts very, very aggressively. And I felt it was a little bit out of character from what has been established. Now, I think what the movie is trying to say is that he's so determined to have redemption, he's going to kind of basically act like a bit of an a-hole to get it. But I just think it just felt at odds to me, because I felt you are clearly scaring this girl, right? You are a priest. You are clearly scaring this girl, and you know that you have failed her potentially at this point. And yet you are locking her in a room, you're taking the phone away, and I thought, well, what difference does it make? How is that helping your redemption by doing those things? And to me, it just felt like I think this is kind of like not how a character would act as he's been portrayed up to this point. It seems to me that they want the story to end at this point, and so that the characters, and this includes Rebekah Kennedy's characters, we'll come on to, need to act in a certain way to manoeuvre the story to that point. And it seemed out of character. It seemed like this guy is being quite kind of like aggressive, and the way he's communicating with her, it just doesn't seem like it's the best way to communicate. And, you know, it had been quite sort of like well acted and sort of well written to this point. And then it kind of just seems like you are saying things that are deliberately being vague, or you're not addressing points, or you're being aggressive because the story wants to go in a direction. And at the same time, I think the Rebekah Kennedy character acts a little bit more hysterical than I think maybe someone would in that respect. So I think that kind of last act, I guess, characters are portrayed to be a little bit against the character that's been established, a little bit unrealistic in their kind of reactions and what they're doing to things. And that is kind of why I say an asterisk with the acting, because I don't actually think it's the actor's fault. They are following the script that has been written. I just think it's the script does these characters a disservice in this last part, particularly because it's been so strong up until that point. That's the problem. So that's the main issue that I have with this film, is it just seems to portray the characters to further the plot because it wants to get to a particular point in the story. And then there is a kind of a twist towards the end. It is super obvious about what is happening, at least to a point. And it's like you'll kind of spot this twist coming halfway through the movie. It is really obvious, but it treats it like it's this big reveal. And you can kind of see it coming. You're almost thinking, how can the characters not see this coming? At least one of them seems to maybe getting an idea about what's actually kind of going on here. You know, so there's that kind of an issue with that. And the last thing I would say, and this is obviously a choice that was made, there are elements here that are introduced where both characters see the other one in a somewhat kind of monstrous form. So this kind of, you know, this kind of like, oh, it's the initial reason why the guy drives off at the beginning, because he kind of sees like Rebekah Kennedy's face almost look monstrous for some reason. Why? Don't know. The movie just does it. And it just kind of like, yeah, don't worry about that. We won't need to explain that. How is it doing it? I mean, okay, magical things are making these people kind of go backwards and forwards in time. I can accept it, right? That's just what's happening. But why is it making them look like monsters in certain things? I mean, it just seems to come out of nowhere just because we need the other character to be scared. I didn't really like that. It seemed lazy to me. Overall, I think this movie is a very well-made film. It's well acted. I think the script, for at least half the movie, it was strong. The second maybe half, I didn't like it as much. But I at least think it kind of ends on a kind of a positive note. It's probably an above average movie. I don't think it's a fantastic movie. It's probably an okay one-time watch. I'll give it a 6 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think? Leave me a comment and I shall look forward to seeing you next time.